What happens when a Hollywood legend with decades of experience sits down for what should be a routine late-night interview, only to find himself facing a host more interested in controversy than conversation? The tension in Studio 6B was palpable from the moment Don Johnson walked onto Jimmy Kimmel's set. What started as promotional banter for Johnson's latest project quickly devolved into something far more sinister, a calculated ambush that would leave audiences stunned and one of television's most respected actors walking off in disgust. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a masterclass in how a host's ego can destroy what should have been a celebration of artistic achievement. Before we dive into exactly what went down that night, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about hosts who prioritize drama over genuine conversation. The evening began innocuously enough. Don Johnson, looking every bit the seasoned professional in his perfectly tailored navy suit, settled into the guest chair with the easy confidence that comes from 40 years in the entertainment business. Jimmy Kimmel, however, seemed unusually animated, his typical sardonic grin carrying an edge that veteran talk show watchers might have recognized as trouble brewing. "Don Johnson, everybody," Kimmel announced to the studio audience, his voice carrying that familiar late-night cadence. "Miami Vice, Nash Bridges, and now starring in what critics are calling your most compelling performance yet." Johnson smiled, graciously leaning forward slightly. "Thanks for having me, Jimmy. It's great to be here." But Kimmel's response immediately shifted the tone. "You know, Don, I have to ask, and our audience is probably wondering too, how does it feel to be considered a has-been making a comeback?" The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Johnson's smile faltered for just a moment, his years of media training the only thing keeping his composure intact. "I'm sorry, what now?" "Oh, come on," Kimmel pressed, his grin widening with what could only be described as predatory glee. "I mean, let's be honest here. Miami Vice was what, 30 years ago? Nash Bridges ended over 2 decades back. Most people probably thought you'd retired, or worse, that Hollywood had forgotten about you entirely." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the playful ribbing that Kimmel was known for. This was something else entirely. Johnson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. "I think you might be confusing me with someone else, Jimmy. I've been working consistently for 4 decades. Last year alone I had 3 major releases." Kimmel waved dismissively, consulting his note cards with theatrical exaggeration. Right, but those were small films, weren't they? Not exactly the cultural impact of Sonny Crockett. Tell me, when you look in the mirror, do you see the same guy who made Pastels and No Socks a Thing? Or do you see someone desperately trying to recapture lightning in a bottle?" The question was delivered with Kimmel's signature smirk, but there was venom behind it. Johnson's publicist, sitting in the green room watching the monitors, was already reaching for her phone. This wasn't going according to any script they'd discussed. "I see someone who's grateful to still be doing what he loves," Johnson replied, his voice carrying the first hint of steel. "And I see someone sitting across from a host who seems more interested in creating controversy than having an actual conversation about the work." Kimmel's eyes lit up at the pushback. "Oh, so now I'm the problem. I'm just asking the questions our viewers want answered. You came on a talk show, Don. The whole point is to talk." "The point," Johnson said, his voice dropping to a lower register, "that anyone who'd watched Miami Vice would recognize as dangerous territory, is supposed to be promoting the project I'm here to discuss. You know, the film that's getting Oscar buzz, the performance that critics are calling a career-defining turn. But apparently you'd rather rehash 30-year-old television shows." The tension in the studio was becoming unbearable. Kimmel seemed to feed off it, leaning back in his chair with the satisfied expression of someone who'd successfully lit a fuse. "Career-defining, really? That's interesting phrasing, because from where I'm sitting, It looks more like career desperate. Like maybe someone's agent told them they needed to take whatever role they could get. Johnson's hands, which had been resting casually on the arms of his chair, slowly curled into fists. You want to know what's desperate, Jimmy? A host who's so insecure about his own relevance that he has to tear down guests to feel important. You've been riding the same tired formula for years, haven't you? Get the guest comfortable, then go for the jugular. Makes for good clips on social media, right? The audience was dead silent now. Even Kimmel's house band seemed frozen, unsure whether this was part of some elaborate bit or genuine hostility unfolding in real time. Kimmel's smile was beginning to look forced, but he pressed on with the relentlessness of a man who'd committed to a course of action and couldn't back down. Now that's the Don Johnson I remember, Kimmel said, his voice dripping with false enthusiasm. There's that Miami Vice intensity. Tell me, do you still practice that steely-eyed stare in the mirror? Or does it just come naturally when someone hits a nerve? Johnson stood up slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. The studio lights caught the silver in his hair, giving him an almost ethereal quality that made his anger seem all the more formidable. You know what comes naturally, Jimmy? Recognizing when someone's trying to make their career off the back of yours. How long have you been planning this little ambush? Did you and your writers sit around brainstorming ways to humiliate a guest? Or is this just your natural talent for being a small-minded bully? The accusation hit Kimmel like a physical blow. His carefully constructed persona, built on years of self-deprecating humor and seemingly genuine interactions with guests, was crumbling in real time. But instead of backing down, he doubled down with the desperation of someone who'd already burned his bridges. Bully? Kimmel's voice cracked slightly, the word coming out higher than intended. I'm doing my job, Don. My job is to ask the hard questions, to dig beneath the surface of whatever sanitized publicity tour you and your people have mapped out. The audience deserves authenticity, not some rehearsed promotional routine. Johnson took a step closer to the desk, his presence suddenly dominating the entire set. Authenticity? You want to talk about authenticity? Let's talk about how you ambush guests who come here in good faith, thinking they're going to have a professional conversation. Let's talk about how you use your platform to punch down at people who can't fight back without looking like the aggressor. Can't fight back? Kimmel's laugh was shrill, desperate. You're Don Johnson. You're a millionaire movie star. You think the audience is going to see you as some kind of victim here? I think the audience is going to see exactly what's happening, Johnson replied, his voice carrying the weight of decades in an industry built on image and perception. They're going to see a host who's so threatened by actual talent that he has to resort to cheap shots and manufactured drama. They're going to see someone who's forgotten that his job is supposed to be entertainment, not character assassination. The studio audience was completely silent now, caught between fascination and horror at watching a professional relationship disintegrate in real time. Kimmel's producers were frantically gesturing from the wings, but he seemed oblivious to everything, except the confrontation unfolding before him. Character assassination? Kimmel's voice was rising now, his carefully maintained cool completely abandoned. I asked you about your career trajectory. I asked you about how it feels to be back in the spotlight. If you can't handle basic questions about your professional life, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Johnson's laugh was cold, devoid of any humor. Basic questions? Jimmy, you opened by calling me a has-been. You suggested I was desperate for work. You implied that my recent success was somehow illegitimate. In what world are those basic questions? In the real world, Kimmel shot back, his face flushing red. In the world where journalists don't just lob softball questions at celebrities who show up to hawk their latest project. In the world where audiences expect more than just promotional fluff disguised as conversation. Journalist? Johnson's eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. Is that what you think you are? Jimmy, you're a comedian who got lucky enough to land a talk show. You're not Edward R. Murrow, you're not even Carson. You're a guy who reads jokes off cue cards and occasionally manages to string together a coherent question. The insult landed with devastating precision. Kimmel's entire body language changed, his shoulders tensing as if preparing for a physical confrontation. At least I didn't spend the best years of my career playing dress-up in pastel suits, pretending to be a tough guy while surrounded by palm trees and synthesizer music. The studio gasped audibly. Even Kimmel's band members exchanged shocked glances. Johnson stood perfectly still for a moment, processing the deliberate cruelty of the attack on what many considered his most iconic role. "There it is," Johnson said quietly, his voice carrying more menace in its restraint than any shout could have managed. "There's your true face, Jimmy. When you can't win with wit, when you can't succeed with charm, you go straight for the throat. You attack the work that defined not just my career, but an entire decade of television history." Kimmel seemed to realize he'd crossed a line, but his pride wouldn't let him retreat. "I'm not attacking anything, Don. I'm just pointing out that some of us have moved beyond playing the same character for 30 years. "The same character?" Johnson's voice was deadly quiet now. "Jimmy, I've played cops, criminals, fathers, sons, heroes, and villains. I've done comedy, drama, action, and everything in between. But you wouldn't know that, would you? Because you didn't bother to do your homework. You came into this interview with a predetermined narrative, and you're going to stick to it regardless of facts." The accusation hung in the air like an indictment. Kimmel's eyes darted to his note cards, and for the first time since the interview he looked genuinely uncertain. "I know your work, Don. I know exactly who you are and what you've done." "Do you?" Johnson challenged. "Because if you knew my work, you'd know that Miami Vice was just the beginning. You'd know about the risks I took, the different kinds of roles I pursued, the way I reinvented myself multiple times over 4 decades. But you don't want to know about any of that, do you? It doesn't fit your narrative." Kimmel's desperation was becoming more apparent with each exchange. "My narrative? What narrative? I'm trying to have a conversation with you, and you're turning it into some kind of persecution complex." "Persecution complex?" Johnson's voice rose for the first time, his control finally beginning to crack. "Jimmy, you invited me here under false pretenses. You told my people this would be a standard promotional interview. Instead, you've spent the last 10 minutes trying to tear down everything I've accomplished in my career. And now you want to gaslight me into thinking I'm overreacting?" The word gaslight seemed to hit Kimmel like a slap. His face went from red to pale in an instant, the accusation carrying implications that went far beyond their immediate confrontation. "That's not what this is, Don. That's not what I'm doing." "Isn't it?" Johnson pressed, sensing weakness. "You're trying to make me question my own perception of what's happening here. You're trying to make the audience think I'm being unreasonable for objecting to your behavior. That's textbook gaslighting, Jimmy, and frankly, it's beneath even you." The studio had become a pressure cooker, the tension so thick it was almost visible. Kimmel's usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by the frantic energy of someone realizing they'd miscalculated badly. His hands fidgeted with his note cards, shuffling them repeatedly as if the right combination might somehow salvage the disaster unfolding before millions of viewers. "Look, Don," Kimmel said, his voice taking on a placating tone that fooled no one. "Maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we start over? Tell the audience about your new film." Johnson remained standing, his posture radiating the kind of controlled fury that made seasoned actors and directors take notice. "Start over? Jimmy, you don't get to attack someone's life's work and then pretend it never happened because you realize you've made a mistake. That's not how this works." "I wasn't attacking your work," Kimmel protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "I was trying to create an engaging conversation. Sometimes that means asking tough questions." "Tough questions?" Johnson's laugh was bitter. "Jimmy, there's a difference between tough questions and character assassination. A tough question would be asking about the challenges of taking on a dramatic role after years of action work. A tough question would be exploring how the industry has changed since I started. What you did was launch a personal attack disguised as journalism. Kimmel's desperation was palpable now. He could see his career flashing before his eyes, could imagine the headlines that would dominate entertainment news for weeks. Don, I think you're overreacting. This is late-night television. We joke around, we have fun. Maybe you're taking this too seriously. Too seriously? Johnson's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than any shout. Jimmy, you just spent 15 minutes trying to convince your audience that I'm a washed-up has been desperately clinging to past glory. You attacked the work that launched my career, the roles that defined a generation of television. And now you want me to laugh it off as a joke? The audience was transfixed, watching what felt like a masterclass in how not to conduct an interview. Kimmel's producers were making increasingly frantic gestures from the wings, but he seemed trapped in a nightmare of his own making, unable to find a way out that didn't involve complete humiliation. That's not what I was doing, Kimmel insisted, but his voice was weak, unconvincing even to himself. I was trying to explore the evolution of your career, the way you've adapted to changes in the industry. Johnson shook his head slowly, his disappointment evident. No, Jimmy. What you were doing was trying to create a viral moment at my expense. You were hoping I'd get angry, hoping I'd lose my composure, so you could have a clip that would generate buzz for your show. Well, congratulations. You got your viral moment. But you also revealed exactly who you are as a person and as a professional. The words hit Kimmel like physical blows. His carefully constructed image, built over years of seemingly genuine interactions with guests, was crumbling in real time. That's not fair, Don. That's not who I am. Isn't it? Johnson challenged, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been in the business long enough to recognize every game being played. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're someone who invites guests onto your show and then ambushes them for entertainment value. It looks like you're someone who values controversy over conversation, drama over dialogue. Kimmel's face was flushed, sweat beading on his forehead under the hot studio lights. I'm trying to do good. Television, Don. I'm trying to give the audience something memorable, something worth watching. At whose expense? Johnson fired back. At the expense of the guests who trust you enough to sit in that chair? At the expense of the professional relationships that make this industry work? Jimmy, good television doesn't require destroying people. Good television comes from genuine connection, from real conversation, from treating your guests with basic human dignity. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut, away from the carnage. Kimmel looked around desperately as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Don, please, Kimmel said, his voice barely above a whisper. Can we just move on? Can we talk about the film? Johnson straightened his tie with deliberate precision, his movements carrying the finality of someone who'd made a decision. You know what, Jimmy? I think we've talked enough. I think your audience has seen exactly what kind of host you are, and exactly what kind of show this is. I came here to promote a film I'm proud of, to have a professional conversation with someone I thought was a professional. Instead, I got ambushed by someone more interested in cheap shots than genuine dialogue. Don, wait! Kimmel called out as Johnson began to remove his microphone. Don't do this! Don't walk out! We can fix this! Johnson paused, looking directly into the camera with the kind of intense stare that had made him famous decades earlier. Some things can't be fixed, Jimmy. Some mistakes reveal too much about who someone really is. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been educational, but I have better things to do with my time than sit here and be insulted by someone who's forgotten what hospitality means. He handed his microphone to a stunned stagehand and walked toward the exit, his departure as dignified as his arrival had been gracious. Kimmel sat frozen behind his desk, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, unable to find words that could possibly salvage the situation. "Don, please," Kimmel called one final time, his voice cracking with desperation. "This isn't how it was supposed to go." Johnson paused at the edge of the stage, turning back one final time. "No, Jimmy, it's not. It was supposed to be a conversation between professionals. Instead, it became a demonstration of everything wrong with modern entertainment. Congratulations on your viral moment. I hope it was worth it." And with that, Don Johnson walked off the Jimmy Kimmel Live set, leaving behind a stunned audience, a humiliated host, and a moment that would define both their careers in ways neither had anticipated. What do you think drives hosts to prioritize controversy over genuine conversation? Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments whether you believe this kind of ambush interviewing has any place in modern entertainment.